If you're watching this, then you likely enjoy taking a cruise and realize that there is a lot to like. From the value to having room, food, and entertainment all included to the relaxation that comes with being at sea, there is a lot to like. But veteran cruisers, myself included, will tell you that not everything is perfect. And there is one thing about cruising that seems to be universally despised according to hundreds of cruise passengers that I talk to. I mean, they seriously seem to hate this thing. I'll tell you exactly what it is and how to avoid it right now. So if you watched much of this YouTube channel in the past, then you've likely heard me mention my website, Cruzely.com. This is a site that I publish with tons of information on cruising. Each day, literally tens of thousands of people head there for information on everything from what to pack to where to park. So a few weeks ago, I sent out an extremely simple survey to my subscribers over on Cruzely. I asked people what their favorite cruise line was, which, surprise, it was an absolute perfect tie between Royal Caribbean and Carnival. I asked what their favorite departure port was. In this case, it was Port Canaveral, and I even asked my readers how many cruises they had been on. Here, more than 55% had been on more than 10 cruises. In other words, the more than 700 people that responded to this survey have been on a ship or two in their day. But the question that I thought had the most interesting answer was one that was essentially an afterthought. On a whim, I put in a question asking, what do you find to be the biggest frustration about cruising? Then I offered up a few suggestions of things that I've heard from passengers that they complain about over the years. Believe me, over on Cruzely and on this YouTube channel, I get all sorts of wild complaints. So I included a few of the more popular choices I had seen, including things like the food quality and the number of other passengers and too little time in ports of call. And then I also included a free response section where people could vote for whatever they wanted to if they didn't like my choices. And boy, it sounds like y'all need to be a little nicer to each other on the cruise ship because rude passengers, they came up several times. But that is not what was by far the biggest complaint. I'll tell you exactly what that complaint was in about 30 seconds, but first, I want to talk about two other major frustrations that passengers voted for and mentioned again and again because I thought that they were extremely interesting. Now, things like the food quality and too few things to do on the ship, they weren't actually big frustrations with percentages in the low single digits according to the survey, so no big deal to most people. But in third place, with about 18% of the vote, was that there are, quote, too many people on the ships. That's something I can definitely see as cruise lines continue to push bigger and bigger ships that hold more and more passengers. It's obvious that a huge chunk of people do not like that trend. Unfortunately for them, I just don't see this changing anytime soon. Ships continue to get bigger. The second most voted frustration in cruising, coming in with about 20% of the vote, was, quote, too little time in ports. Anyone who sails knows that you normally get about 8 hours in a cruise port on a Caribbean trip. You arrive at 8 a.m., you're back on board about 4 in the afternoon. So yeah, it's not a lot of time to go and explore a place. But some trips are changing this. In fact, you can find some cruises with late night or even overnight stays at some private islands. So if this is a complaint of yours, then at least there is some good news there. But forget short time in port or too many people on the ship. By far, the biggest response as the biggest frustration in cruising among the 700 people that I surveyed, with nearly 41% of the vote, was, quote, extra charges like gratuities, drinks, and activities on board. If you think about it, this makes a lot of sense. Just being on the ship, you're going to be hit with a gratuity charge at around $15 a day. You want a drink? That's extra with a helping of gratuity tacked on top of that. And if you want to eat outside of the buffet or the main dining room, then yep, that's normally an extra charge too. Even the cruise fare is structured like this. You see a small headline price on the cruise line website, but then you're charged double occupancy for the room, so you can double the cost of the cruise right off the bat. And on top of that, are those port fees and taxes that add up to another $100 or $200 per person on many trips. It can feel like what you actually pay for the cruise is just a fraction of the cost of your trip, and the numbers just keep going higher. The good news, while this may be the biggest frustration according to those people that I surveyed, it doesn't have to be this way. Here's how. Now let me get one thing clear. You really can't avoid many of these charges. Things like port fees and gratuities are simply a fact of life. And you'll also have to pay for drinks, specialty dining, and the other extras if you want them. But that doesn't mean that they have to be as big an annoyance as they obviously are to so many people. The truth is that the cruise lines, they know that passengers don't like the extra charges either. But they also don't want to just remove the charges for them and lose that revenue. Instead, many cruise lines offer something that the industry calls bundling. This is where they just lump in the things that you normally pay extra for into the cost of the actual cruise. For example, Norwegian Cruise Line is known for their free at sea offer. With this deal, you can book your cruise and get things like the drink package and specialty dining, Wi-Fi, shore excursions are even included. Now, to be sure, the price for this offer does run higher than the bare bones sail away cabin without them included. However, the cost can be less than if you paid the base fare and then added them all on later. But more importantly, to the people that are frustrated by those extra charges, it includes practically everything that you spend more for while on a cruise ship. So you pay one fee when you buy the cruise, and then you're largely done. And it's not just Norwegian Cruise Line that is doing this. Princess offers something similar with a deal offering Wi-Fi, drinks, and gratuities included. Celebrity Cruises offers a package with the same sort of things included in your cruise fare as well. So you can get on board, and essentially the only money that you have to spend is in the casino or when you're in port. And these bundles have grown in popularity, with more cruise lines introducing them in recent years. So for those hundreds of people that answered my survey about how much they absolutely hate the extra charges they see on a cruise ship, and the literally millions of passengers that those respondents represent, there's good news and bad news. The bad news, nothing is free on a cruise. Whether it's part of a higher cruise fare or a feeling of a constant extra charge, you're gonna pay either way. But the good news is that it doesn't mean you have to go through the frustration of feeling like you're being nickeled and dimed. There are ways that the cruise lines help you get around that feeling, but just don't think you won't end up paying more one way or the other. So what's your biggest frustration in cruising? Is it all the extra charges, or is it something else? Let me and everybody else know in the comments below. As well, be sure to visit Cruzely.com, which I mentioned earlier in this video. And until next time, happy sailing.